On one of the January days of the 19th year, Sergey Gavrilov, an ordinary resident of Samara, arranged an evening meal for himself. A whole mountain of Navy-style pasta rose on the plate. Finally, the thunderous rumbling of the stomach will stop tormenting him. Having touched the meat with his lips, Sergey slightly grimaced. It seemed too fatty to him, but there was nothing else to eat. Hunger won't bring food. Spoonful by spoonful the plate was emptied. Having eaten what is called to the drop, Sergey went to sleep. The next day he tried to create a new culinary masterpiece, and soon the dining table was adorned with boiled potatoes with pieces of meat. However, the result obtained again did not justify Sergey's hopes. He frowned and, having finished eating, carelessly threw the bowl into the sink, not even bothering to wash it. The third day of this gastronomic journey ended with the preparation of a thick soup. Sergey ate it in gulps. He was very hungry, but the satisfaction from the meal was small. Perhaps the man was not able to enjoy the taste qualities of the dishes due to one ingredient, slices of meat from his own mother's legs. But now, let's take everything in order. On the 11th of January 2019, Lyubov Gavrilova, who was 55 at the time and had just received her pension, returned home. There, her son Sergey was nervously waiting for her, counting the minutes until her arrival. As soon as the woman undressed and entered the room, he immediately turned to her with a request for money, but the mother refused. And there were solid reasons for that. 28-year-old Sergey Gavrilov was just recently released from the Chetirezhdy prison. The young man on trial had already gone down the slippery slope of crime. He just couldn't cope with the chaotic way of life. Since his release, Sergey spent whole days in bars, drowning this winter melancholy with alcoholic beverages. It was this new binge that his mother was afraid of. She openly justified her refusal to share money by arguing that her son would spend it on another bottle of vodka, adding a mild comment, "You should work, my dear, and earn money on your own." This humiliating remark, coupled with the disappearance of the prospect of material gain, instantly turned Sergey into a furious beast. He picked up a heavy brick from the floor, which had been peacefully lying in the far corner of the room all this time, and with all his might he smashed it onto his mother's head. From the deafening blow, the woman lost consciousness and fell, but the hatred inside Sergey did not subside. His eyes caught a long electrical cord. He grabbed it and wrapped it around the woman's neck. Sergey immediately moved the body of the murdered woman to the balcony, locked the door, and with a sense of relief rushed to his mother's purse. There he finally found what he had been so fanatically dreaming of owning: money. Sergey put the whole pack into his trouser pocket and went out onto the street to avoid the dangers of his close relative, to buy a few bottles of spirits. Lyubov Gavrilova could no longer look at him with sugariness. She lay motionless on the cold floor of the balcony. Sergey rapidly spent his mother's pension in a matter of days. He drank incessantly, hung out in computer clubs, gambled. In general, he was up to all sorts of mischief. He could not even return home for several days. When he did return, the apartment was filled with a collection of vodka and beer bottles. The refrigerator emptied at the same frantic pace, until one fine day there was nothing in it at all. A fly buzzed in the air and hovered over Sergey's ear, as if mocking the situation he found himself in. The man nervously paced around the room, pondering what to do and what to eat. He couldn't get a job now, and he had no desire to do so. His savings were gone, but his stomach, like a hungry beast, still craved sustenance. And then Sergey's face broke into a wide smile, his cheeks flushed brightly, and his eyes filled with a moist, unnatural shine. "We're alive!" he shouted cheerfully and almost jumped to the balcony, opened the door, enthusiastically digging into his chest of things. Mother was still there, almost unchanged. The harsh January frost clearly worked in her favor. Sergey moved his mother's body to the middle of the room, undressed her down to her underwear, took a large kitchen knife in his hands, stood for a long time and examined each fragment of the body, thinking about which one to take off first. Finally, he cut off some meat from one of the lower extremities with a knife. The corpse underwent such a procedure for 3 days. In the end, the legs were completely cut off and cut in some places with a knife. Soon the neighbors Gavrilovs began to wonder where the love had disappeared to. Sergey, without hesitation, said that she was seriously ill to the point that she could not even leave the confines of the house. However, When, after a whole month, Love did not show up to anyone familiar, they raised the alarm and suspected something was wrong. The whole house on Suvorov Street was in turmoil. Those where the mother was located became interested, including Sergey's biological sister. He did not consider it necessary to go into details, but only briefly passed by in the hospital. For some reason, the girl didn't believe this, so she decided to find out the details of her strange disappearance. And later, when she personally visited the apartment where her mother lived, she felt some strange feeling and immediately called the detective. On February 17th, the police officer arrived at the designated place. Nothing in the rooms or the kitchen caught his attention, but something made him go out onto the balcony. There, among a pile of rubbish, lay a legless female corpse, which Ascovi was stunned. In the strength of his profession and experience, he, of course, did not have to be easily surprised, but this sight was really not for the faint-hearted. And from the details of the crime which Gavrilov shared later, and from the realization of the fact that the victim of the cold-blooded and brutal crime by its nature became his own mother, the operative's hair stood on end. The criminal unfortunately admitted that the meat was tasteless, too fatty, I didn't like it. Every day he cut off a piece from his mother's leg and thus rid himself of the sad prospect of dying from starvation. His life was pushed to the brink by desperation and poverty. His mother received a pension, but it was too late. Money for a can of beer for her beloved son. Sergey Gavrilov was recognized as insane. He beautifully realized what he was doing. First, the court sentenced him to 15 years of freedom deprivation, but then the term was reduced to 14 years and 3 months. Such a mitigating measure became a consequence of the realization that the defendant was forced into cannibalism due to extreme hunger and the impossibility of alleviating it in other ways. Gavrilova was placed in a correctional colony 13 in the village of Spiridonovka near Samara. This same colony is named Red Utk. It was behind bars that he received a secondary education, which he could not achieve before. On parole, he demonstrated quite good performance, but his colony colleagues could not call his behavior exemplary. Gavrilov repeatedly violated discipline, conflicted with other inmates, did not follow the established instructions, the prison regime. Having been trained within the prison walls, the cannibal even got a specialty. Ironically, he became a stonemason. Now every brick that fell into his hands was supposed to turn not into a weapon, but rather into a tool for creating something new. Having thought it over, Gavrilov decided to change his fate, wrote a petition to the court, but it was rejected. The peculiarities of the criminal's behavior behind bars did not allow him to leave the prison boundaries, outlined by a ring of barbed wire. The criminal did not embark on the path of correction, so argued the decision in the Volzhsky district court. The detention center inspector Gavrilov's guard described him as an absolutely ordinary citizen, like millions of others. In conversations and in appearance, he was no different from others. The only thing that I remember about him is that once he asked for coffee with cream and a croissant for breakfast. Prisoners are rarely satisfied with local conditions, but the food is always balanced and ecologically clean, including porridge, meat, and cereals. Sergey Gavrilov may attempt to get free again. Just this thought alone already instills a wild fear in the residents of the Sukhodol village, where he lived. And not only in them. A young woman named Elena admitted that she is still under the impression of this incident, and every time someone mentions it, a shiver runs through her body. In those years I was still in school, Elena recalls. The school was right next to that evil house where it all happened. My friends and I would always walk around it and look at that very balcony with a special horror. It's scary to imagine what will happen if they release this monster and he comes back here. Who knows what's on his mind. There's a children's playground nearby, and we're scared for the kids' safety first and foremost. Another resident of the village, Tatiana, admitted that she didn't even believe in the veracity of this story, thinking it was just another scary tale invented by parents to scare their disobedient children. In an interview, the woman shared her fears with journalists. This happened when I was in school. At first, I didn't even pay attention to the rumors, because I simply didn't want to come to terms with the fact that something like this could happen in our district. Such a harsh reality is astonishing in its severity. Then someone showed a video taken by the police directly at the scene of the crime. The deceased woman's head was all blue, presumably from a severe blow with a brick. There was almost nothing left of her legs. As far as I remember, the body was without underwear. We were then told that Gavrilov not only ate the corpse himself, but also treated his friends with the meat of his mother. Of course, they didn't know it was human, and without a second thought, they accepted the treat. As for me, I don't even want to think about the possibility that this creature could settle here among us again. If it has once tasted human flesh, it may want to do it again. I fear for myself and those around me, especially the children. The fear of the residents is understandable and not unfounded. Some sources claim, yes, and in principle, if you just count the numbers, it turns out that in the 23rd year, the Samara cannibal can leave the red corner and start a new, beautiful life that he dreams of day and night behind the thick bars of the iron lattice.